I'm frequently asked by people whether using a rowing machine like this one is a good way to exercise, a good way to get zone 2 cardio without hurting your knees. So in this video, I'll share some pointers on good rowing technique using a rowing machine like this one. And I'll also share 3 ways to make sure you're protecting your knees if your knees are stiff or achy or sore, you're just trying to avoid aggravating them or irritating them. And I'll share 5 ways to make the exercise more challenging. My name is Laurie Kurtz-Kelly, and I'm here to help you build stronger, healthier knees without surgery. For more information on the Better Knees method, check out the link in the description below this video. Okay, let's start by talking about the foot stretchers. You want to put your feet on the foot stretchers underneath the strap, and the strap should be tightened right about the ball of your foot, right below your toes. Now, if your hamstrings, if the back of your thighs are particularly tight when your legs are straight, when you try and bend over or that type of thing, you might want to drop the foot stretcher a little bit. So in that case, you would just lower it so this can be lifted up and slid down and then slid into place. And I could put my foot lower on the machine like that. Likewise, if you have a smaller foot, and I wear about a size 11, but if you have a smaller foot, then you're probably going to need to lift this up before you slide your foot in, right? To get the foot in the correct position. Okay, but this is about the place where I put my feet most of the time. To start the rowing stroke, you'll hold on to the handle. You'll notice there's a chain here. That chain will stay horizontal, so you don't want to lift and lower the handle very much at all. Once you have it gripped and your arms are relatively straight, you're going to push with your feet, push through your legs. Your knees will straighten and you'll pull that handle in to the top of your abs. So you don't want the handle to be pulled in, at your shoulder height, or definitely not at your chin. You don't want it to be pulled in down at your waist or your hips. Right at the top of the abs is kind of a good place to pull in toward. And then you allow it to go back out. You're going to bend your knees and you'll be back in the starting position. So each time you'll push through your legs, bring the handle into the top of your abs, let the handle go out, bend your knees again. Okay, next let's talk about 3 ways to protect your knees. One is setting the resistance a little bit lower on the machine. So this dial on the side of the flywheel, it can go up till 10 or it can be down at 1. 1 is going to be the easiest, 10 is going to be the most challenging. I would recommend you start around a 3 or a 4. When you're pressing against the foot stretchers in the rowing stroke, you should feel like a little bit of resistance, but if you're feeling a lot through your knees, lowering the dial, decreasing the resistance on the machine will help decrease some of the pressure through your knees. You can also decrease pressure on your knees by limiting how much you're sliding or how much your knees are bending. So when I'm in the rowing stroke, instead of letting my knees bend all the way up, I may only go halfway, or perhaps 3/4 of the way. The third way to protect your knees is to control your motion. And that's going to look like controlling how fast you complete each rowing stroke. So the screen on your rowing machine will tell you how many times you're completing a rowing stroke in a minute. Right now I'm rowing at 18 strokes per minute. And this gives me control over how far I bend and straighten my knees. So if I increase my stroke rate, how many times I'm completing each rowing stroke in a minute, right now I'm rowing at a roughly 30 strokes per minute. And what can happen is if you're not used to the rowing machine, you can straighten your knees too far, kind of lock them out too quickly, and it's harder to control what we talked about before, the amount of bending that you're that you're getting. So if you're at that faster stroke rate, most people have a tendency, at least when they're first starting out, to like bend their knees way too far, kind of put extra force on their knees at the very top of the motion. And by slowing down your stroke rate, you can control that motion and decrease the pressure on your knees. Like any new exercise that you start doing for the first time, you'll want to introduce the rowing machine gradually. So I suggest that you start with 5 minutes. Row for 5 minutes, see how your knees are feeling during, but even more importantly, see how your knees are feeling afterwards. Later that day, the next day, even up to 48 to 72 hours later. And that's because your knee weakness, if you have any weakness in your knees, that will show up most likely not while you're rowing, but later. So if you get some stiffness or achiness, swelling, those are all signs that your knees deep inside, not necessarily the muscles, maybe the muscles too, but certainly deep inside your knees, they're not quite strong enough. And you can protect your knees better by using one or all of those 3 ways to protect your knees. But if after a few days you're like, well, my knees feel fine, or they feel no worse, they feel good or neutral after that 5-minute session of rowing, then I would increase your frequency. So maybe you row the following week on Monday and Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Row 2 or 3 times a week, not on back-to-back days. And each time, keep it to 5 minutes. At this point, if your knees are feeling the same or better, you're not getting any additional stiffness, soreness, achiness, or swelling, you may be ready to make the exercise more challenging. I have 5 ways that I recommend that you do this, but I recommend choosing only one of the 5 ways at a time. So the first way is to increase the duration of your rowing. If on a given week you've been rowing 5 minutes per session, then the following week go to 6 minutes. If that still feels good or neutral, the following week after that, go to 7 minutes, and so on. The second way is to increase the frequency. So let's say you've been rowing on Monday and Thursday pretty consistently, or at least for 1 week, and you feel good or neutral afterwards. The following week, think about introducing a 3rd time. So maybe you go Monday, Thursday, and Saturday that next week. After you've been doing that for 2 or 3 weeks, you might consider adding a 4th session. And that point, it's a bit more of a jump, because 2 of those sessions are going to be on back-to-back days, which leaves less time for your knees to recover. The third way to make the rowing machine more challenging is by increasing the speed of your movement. So right now I'm rowing at 18 strokes per minute. And if I do this for a week and my knees feel good or neutral afterwards, I might consider increasing the number of strokes per minute up by 2 to 4. So going to a 22 would look like this. And then maybe a week or 2 after that, going to a 26. And eventually working up to a 30. The fourth way to increase your rowing challenge is by increasing the slide, how much the seat is moving, basically how much your knees are bending. So we talked about protecting your knees by, instead of going all the way to basically whatever your full or maximal knee bend is, from straight to only halfway there, right? So that looks like, for me, that half slide looks like this. And after a week or 2 of doing half slide and it feels good to my knees, then I might choose to go to 3/4 slide, which would look like that. And I could continue to gradually increase that over the next week or 2 to what's considered 7/8 slide. It's not an exact measurement. You kind of have to ballpark it. but it's most of your motion. You just avoid the very last bit of your knee bend until you've been able to do that really well without any irritation, and then you can get what's considered the full slide, or pretty much all of your knee bend, as long as you're controlling that motion and you're not, slamming, up to the knee bend here at that part of the movement. The fifth way to increase the challenge is to change the resistance on the machine. So if you're at 3, moving it to 4, and if you're at 4, moving it to a 5, and really, I don't think the goal is necessarily to get up to a 10. You want to be able to move through. As you increase the resistance, it may be harder to keep your rate. So, but increasing the resistance is certainly the fifth way, then, and a good option to kind of increase the challenge. Like I said before, make sure you choose one of the 5 ways, one at a time. So maybe one week you're ready to advance your rowing machine exercise and you choose to increase the frequency. You go from twice a week to 3 times a week. The following week you keep it at 3 times a week and you choose instead to increase the rate on the machine. You go from 18 strokes per minute to 20 strokes per minute. By not increasing both the frequency and the rate in this example at the same time, on the same week, it's easier to determine what was too much for your knees if your knees complain. If your knees don't complain, then there's never an issue, but it's always better to kind of move through the progressions a little more gradually and not have setbacks. A setback can occur when deep inside your knees, there's weakness. It's not as, your knees deep inside are not as strong as they need to be for whatever your activity is. And those symptoms, stiffness, soreness, achiness, or swelling, may take 48 to 72 hours to show up. If you introduce the rowing machine with the recommendations that I've outlined during this video, you will likely improve your brain health, or mental health, your heart health, and your knee health. You may be feeling your muscles, and your muscle endurance may certainly improve in your legs and your arms and your back, but you're also going to be strengthening deep inside your knees, something that I advocate for in the Better Knees method. If you're interested in the Better Knees method, you can check out the link in the description below this video. And if this video was helpful for you, please like it so other people find it, and then hit the subscribe button so you don't miss future videos that will help you build stronger, healthier knees without surgery.